He chose our housewarming party to publicly destroy me. In front of our friends, in the middle of the living room I had spent 6 months designing, my boyfriend Ethan announced he was leaving me. Then he revealed he'd already sold his half of our new home to his mistress sewer lawyer, Olivia, and handed me a 30-day eviction notice. He thought he had left me with nothing but humiliation and the ashes of our shared dream. He was wrong. He didn't know that my work as an interior designer had led me to accidentally uncover the massive fraud that fueled his entire life. He thought he was closing a chapter. I was about to burn his whole book. The final rays of the Texas sun slanted through the large picture windows, casting a golden glow on the gleaming oak floors. I stood back, taking in the scene with a deep, satisfying breath. The air in the house on Sycamore Hill smelled of new paint, fresh-cut lilies, and the faint, sweet promise of champagne. It was the smell of victory, of a summit reached after a long and arduous climb. For 6 draining, exhilarating months, I had poured my soul into transforming the structure of wood and drywall into a home, a sanctuary, a testament to us. Ethan came up behind me, his arms sliding around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder, his gaze following mine around the room. "It's perfect, Clara," he murmured, his voice a low hum against my ear. "Everything. You're a magician. You turn everything you touch to gold." He leaned in and kissed me, a quick, proprietary press of lips. "The house looks like $1 million. You look like $1 million." In that moment, basking in his praise, I felt golden. I didn't realize then that he was admiring his assets, not his partner. "Just wait," I whispered, turning in his arms. "Once the Sterling Corp contract kicks in, we can finally book that trip to Italy we've been talking about. First class, all the way." "To my brilliant designer," he said, his eyes sparkling. "And to Italy." An hour later, the house was alive. Friends and colleagues milled through the open-plan living space, their voices a happy hum against the backdrop of a curated jazz playlist. I navigated the crowd, a flute of champagne in hand, accepting compliments on the custom-built shelving, the unique light fixtures, the calming color palette. My best friend Maya pulled me aside by the kitchen island. "Okay, seriously, this place is insane," she said, her eyes wide. "You've outdone yourself. So when are you going to tell everyone about the Sterling deal? You deserve a victory lap." "Soon," I promised, my own excitement bubbling up. "I'm just waiting for the right moment." Just then, Olivia approached, a vision in a silk dress that shimmered under the lights. As our lawyer, she had been an integral part of this journey. I'd come to see her as a friend, a sharp, savvy woman I admired. "Clara, congratulations," she said, her smile bright. "The house is even more stunning in person. Ethan chose a good lawyer, but he chose a better designer." I laughed, feeling a flush of pride at the compliment. It was only later I would understand the venomous irony laced in those words. She wasn't admiring my work, she was taking inventory. The right moment, it turned out, was not mine to choose. Ethan, standing in the center of the room, tapped a fork against his glass. The gentle chime cut through the chatter, a sound that sliced the air with sudden importance. A hush fell. He was a picture of effortless charm in a tailored blue shirt that brought out the color of his eyes. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," he began, his voice smooth and resonant. I felt a thrill of anticipation, my own announcement momentarily forgotten. This was it. He was going to say something wonderful, maybe even propose. Our friends leaned in, their faces glowing with shared affection. "Clara and I wanted to thank you all for coming to celebrate this incredible milestone with us," he continued, his gaze locked on mine, warm and intoxicating. "This house represents a new beginning. It's about making bold decisions, about not being afraid to pursue what you truly want in life." He paused, letting the silence thicken with expectation. I held my breath, a smile already forming on my lips. "And my new beginning starts without her." The words didn't register at first. They hung in the air, nonsensical and alien, a language I didn't understand. My smile froze, feeling brittle and strange on my face. The flute in my hand trembled, champagne sloshing over the rim onto my fingers. A few people chuckled, a nervous, uncertain sound, assuming it was the start of a terrible, unfunny joke. But Ethan's expression had shifted. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cool, hard finality that was utterly chilling. The silence in the room became absolute, a deafening vacuum where laughter had been moments before. I saw Maya's smile falter, her eyes darting from his face to mine in confusion. "We're over," he stated, his voice devoid of all emotion, as if he were discussing a business transaction. "And to make the transition cleaner, I've already taken steps to dissolve our shared assets." He gestured vaguely around the beautiful room I had built, his hand dismissing my 6 months of work with a flick of his wrist. "This house, for instance. I've used my legal authority as the primary name on the mortgage to sell my 50% share." A collective gasp rippled through our friends, a sound of pure shock. My own breath was trapped in my chest, a block of ice. Then, the ultimate betrayal unfolded, the final act of his meticulously planned theater of cruelty. Olivia, our lawyer, stepped forward from the edge of the crowd to stand beside Ethan. She wore a smug, triumphant smirk that made her pretty face look ugly. "I'd like to introduce you all to my new partner," Ethan announced, placing a proprietary hand on Olivia's lower back, "both in life and in this property." The world tilted. The beautiful room, my creation, suddenly felt like a cage. Olivia, my trusted legal counsel, was his mistress. They hadn't just been having an affair. They had been conspiring, using my own trust and the mechanisms of the law as their weapons against me. As if on cue, Olivia produced a crisp manila envelope from her designer clutch. She approached me, her heels clicking ominously on the hardwood floors I had personally selected, the sound echoing in the dead silence. "Clara," she said, her voice a sickeningly sweet melody of professional courtesy. "As the legal representative for the new co-owner, and as co-owner myself, I'm required to serve you this." She slid the document into my numb hand. My fingers wouldn't close around it. "It's a formal notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises with your personal belongings. We've even included a list to help clarify what constitutes personal versus shared assets." 30 days. My home, my life, my future. All of it detonated in a single public execution. I looked from Olivia's polished, predatory face to Ethan's cold, indifferent eyes. He had orchestrated this entire evening not just to break up with me, but to humiliate me, to shatter me in front of everyone we knew. He wanted to leave me with nothing, not even my dignity. Our friends, finally shaking off their paralysis, began to murmur in outrage. Maya started forward, her face a mask of fury. "You can't do this, Ethan! This is her home too! She designed every inch of it." "Actually, he can," Olivia interjected smoothly. "A shark, smelling blood." According to Section 7B of the trust agreement Clara signed, Ethan, as the primary signatory, has full discretionary power over the asset. She should have read the fine print more carefully. Her words were a direct shot at my intelligence, a public insinuation that I was naive, that I was careless. It was designed to disarm me, to make me look foolish. They had thought of everything. Every loophole, every legal technicality. The party dissolved quickly after that, a funeral procession of friends leaving in a flurry of hushed condolences and angry glares directed at the new couple. The air, once filled with celebration, was now thick with pity and disgust. Ethan and Olivia remained, watching me, waiting for the tears, the screaming, the breakdown they so clearly expected and craved. Ethan poured 2 glasses of the expensive scotch a friend had brought as a housewarming gift and handed one to Olivia. They toasted, their glasses clinking softly in the tense silence. Then they retreated upstairs to the master bedroom. I heard the door click shut, and the sound of their soft laughter echoed down the stairs. Alone in the cavernous living room, the silence was a physical weight. The scent of lilies now seemed funereal. I walked through the space, my hand trailing over the cool marble of the kitchen island, the soft texture of the custom drapery. I was a ghost in my own life. I sank onto the cold floor, the beautiful, empty space mocking me with what I had just lost. The injustice was a burning acid in my throat. For a long time, I just sat there, hollowed out. The anger and shock gave way to a wave of profound, soul-crushing grief. I cried, not for the man I had lost, that man had never truly existed, but for the woman I had been, the one who had believed in him, in them, so blindly. But as the hours ticked by and the moon rose high in the sky, the grief began to cool and harden into something else, something cold, sharp, and intensely focused. Rage. They thought they had all the power, they thought they were in control, they thought I was just a decorator, a creative type too emotional to fight back. They were wrong. I rose from the floor, my movements stiff, and walked to my laptop on the kitchen island. I needed to understand. I needed to see the documents I had signed, to find the clause Olivia had so smugly quoted. I started searching through old shared drives, looking for the folder from the house closing. As I sifted through files, my eyes caught on a folder I'd created weeks ago. It was labeled Sterling Project Due Diligence, my professional life, a world away from this personal hell. On a whim, driven by a need for distraction, I clicked it open. Inside was a subfolder I had named E-Tech Appraisal. E-Tech, Ethan's small, up-and-coming tech company. As part of my extensive preparation for the Sterling Corp contract, I had been researching their recent acquisitions to better understand their corporate culture. One of the companies on their potential acquisition list was E-Tech. To get a feel for their brand, I had done a deep dive pulling public records and investor reports. In the process, I had stumbled upon inconsistencies, red flags. I had found draft financial statements left on a shared drive, emails with odd phrasing, and a pattern of payments to shell corporations that made no sense. At the time, I dismissed it as something I didn't understand, the messy back end of a business I wasn't part of. I had even asked Ethan about it, and he'd laughed it off as creative accounting, a necessary evil for a startup to survive. I had believed him. Now, I saw it for what it was, fraud. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat of dawning realization. I opened Ophelia's spreadsheet I had compiled, cross-referencing dates and payments. My eyes scanned the columns, my mind racing, connecting dots I had previously ignored. Payment to Apex Solutions for $50,000 on the 12th of June. I pulled up our bank records. Down payment for Sycamore Hill, $250,000, paid on the 15th of June. The dates were too close. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I did a quick search for Apex Solutions. The company was registered to a P.O. box with a single director whose name I didn't recognize, but the registered agent for the company was Ethan's personal accountant. The air in my lungs turned to ice. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a pattern. Money funneled from E-Tech Investor, funds into shell corporations, then into a private account. An account I now realized had paid for the down payment on this very house. The house he claimed was his to sell. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had built our entire life on a foundation of lies and stolen money. He had used me as a cover, the successful, artistic girlfriend who made his chaotic life look stable and aspirational. And the final, beautiful irony, my biggest professional achievement, the Sterling Corp contract, had inadvertently given me the very weapon I needed to destroy him. Sterling Corp was considering buying his company. They were about to pay millions for a house of cards. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the first real expression I'd shown all night. Ethan wanted to play a game of legal chess. Fine, but he was playing checkers. I was about to checkmate him in a way he could never see coming. The 30-day clock wasn't a countdown to my eviction. It was a countdown to his complete and utter ruin. The first morning of my 30-day countdown began not with shouting or tears, but with the invasive, ordinary sounds of a life I was no longer part of. I woke on the sofa. I couldn't bear to sleep in our beddo, the smell of coffee brewing and the low murmur of voices from the kitchen. Ethan and Olivia. They were moving through my space, my creation, as if it had always been theirs. I heard the clink of mugs, the slide of a drawer I had installed myself, and then a peal of Olivia's laughter, sharp and clear. It felt like a violation, a quiet assertion of their victory. I lay there, motionless, feeling like a ghost in my own home, a trespasser on the territory of my own life. My war, I knew, would not be won with loud confrontations. It would be a silent, meticulous hunt. A few days later, my resolve was tested in the most excruciating way. The doorbell rang, and standing on the porch was a nondescript man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard. The appraiser, and just behind him, stepping out of her sleek black sedan, was Olivia. "Just here to supervise," she said, her smile a thin, sharp line. Standard procedure. It was anything but standard. It was a calculated act of psychological torture. I had to lead the stranger through my home, room by room, while Olivia trailed behind us, her presence a smug perfume in the air. In the living room, the appraiser noted the custom-built shelving. "That's impressive," he said. "Adds significant value." "Yes, Clara is very talented," Olivia commented from the doorway, her voice laced with a condescending sweetness that made my skin crawl. "We'll almost be sorry to see it go when we remodel." Every comment was a paper cut, a small, deliberate infliction of pain. I had to describe the imported Italian marble I'd chosen for the kitchen countertops, the reclaimed wood for the mantelpiece, all while Olivia watched me. A small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. It was a performance of civility that required every ounce of my self-control. I answered the appraiser's questions with a calm, professional demeanor, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Each moment of her petty cruelty only chiseled my resolve into something harder and more dangerous. When they finally left, I stood in the silent house, my hands clenched into fists, my knuckles white. The humiliation was a fuel burning hot and clean inside me. My sanctuary, the one place I could escape the wreckage of my personal life, was my work. I threw myself into the Sterling Corp project with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. The chaos in my head was channeled into clean lines and bold color palettes. My grief and fury poured into blueprints and mood boards. I wasn't just designing an office space, I was building a fortress, both for my client and for my own sanity. My presentations were flawless, my research meticulous. Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Sterling, a sharp, no-nonsense man in his late 60s, began singling me out in meetings. "Clara's vision is exactly what this company needs," he'd say, his gruff voice holding a note of genuine respect, clarity, integrity. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I was living a double life, the brilliant composed designer by day and the vengeful spy master by night. The psychological assault from home continued. One afternoon, I found a printed spreadsheet on the kitchen island, a place I knew Ethan knew I would see it. It was titled Asset Division. It was a meticulously compiled list of every object in the house, with columns for belongs to Ethan, Olivia, and belongs to Clara. They had claimed everything of monetary value, which I expected. But they had also deliberately chosen items of pure sentiment. The antique world map we bought on our first anniversary trip to a dusty shop in Lisbon. The sprawling oak bookshelf we had spent a whole weekend building together, our hands covered in stain and our laughter echoing in the empty room, even the small chipped mug I drank my morning tea from. It was a petty, cruel attempt to erase me, to deny that my memories had any value. I took the list, folded it neatly, and dropped it into the recycling bin. I replied to Ethan's follow-up email with a single sentence. The list is acceptable. Let them have the ghosts. I was hunting bigger game. Every night, after a grueling day of work, my real work began. I took the folder of evidence to a man named Mr. Davies, a corporate fraud attorney whose name I got from a trusted contact. He was a small, bird-like man with eyes that missed nothing. He spread my documents across his mahogany desk, his silence more intimidating than any shouting could be. He spent nearly an hour poring over my spreadsheet, cross-referencing it with the files I'd pulled from the shared drive. "Miss Vance," he said finally, looking up and folding his hands. His voice was quiet but firm. "What you have here is a thermonuclear device. The evidence of embezzlement, wire fraud, it's all here. The patterns are clear. But you must understand, deploying it will start a messy public war. A war against your ex-boyfriend and his lawyer mistress. They will not go quietly. They will try to destroy your reputation. They will dig into your past, your finances, your relationships. They will paint you as a bitter, vengeful woman." He was testing me, searching for any sign of weakness. I met his gaze without flinching. "Mr. Davies, they already tried to destroy me in my own living room. They think they've already won. They tried to make me a victim. I'm just trying to be a survivor." His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Very well. Then our first step is to make the circumstantial evidence irrefutable. We need the smoking gun, a direct, unbroken chain linking the embezzled funds to the down payment on the house. Can you get that?" That's where Maya came in. She arrived at my house that Friday night with 2 bottles of expensive wine and a high-end encrypted laptop. "All right," she said, setting up on the kitchen island. "Let's go ruin a man's life. He deserves it." While I laid out the financial puzzle fee names of the shell companies, the suspicious dates, the transfer amounts, she worked her magic. It wasn't easy. "He's good," she muttered after the first hour, her brow furrowed in concentration. He's layered it through 3 different shell core registered in different states, using a VPN to mask his IP. This guy is slick, not stupid. For hours, we hit dead ends, digital brick walls designed to frustrate and defeat. Just as I was about to suggest we give up for the night, a new wave of despair washing over me. She froze. "Wait a minute," she whispered, her fingers flying across the keyboard, a string of code appearing on the dark screen. He got cocky. He used the same secondary password for the Shell Corp's bank portal as he did for his old fantasy football account. What an idiot. A few more clicks, and then she went still. "Oh, you son of a bitch," she breathed, turning the laptop screen toward me. There it was. Not a spreadsheet, not a hint, but a bank statement. A wire transfer for exactly $250,000 from one of Ethan's shell corporations, Apex Innovative Solutions, to a private holding account. And from that holding account, a direct payment to the escrow company for the house on Sycamore Hill. The transaction was dated the 15th of June, the day after he had received a major round of investor funding for E-Tech. He had stolen from his own company to buy the house he had just kicked me out of. We had him. Cold. The following week, the universe decided to hand me not just a weapon, but the entire arena. I was in a private lunch meeting with Mr. Harrison, a rare honor. We were at a quiet, upscale restaurant downtown discussing the next phase of the Sterling project. He was impressed with my work, and he was a man who didn't give compliments lightly. "You're going places, Clara," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "You have a good head on your shoulders." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "In fact, your timing couldn't be better. We're about to close a major acquisition, a small dynamic tech firm. The new headquarters you're designing, it's primarily for them. We're gonna need your sharp eye to help merge their culture with ours seamlessly." My heart began a slow, heavy pound. "That sounds exciting, Mr. Harrison. Which company?" "A promising little outfit called E-Tech," he said, taking a sip of wine. "Founder's a sharp young guy named Ethan Cole." The name hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. The sounds of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, the low hum of conversation faded into a dull roar. E-Tech, he had said it. Out loud, in front of me. They weren't just considering it. They were in the final stages of a deal that would make Ethan a multimillionaire off his crime. The world narrowed to a single, blindingly bright point. It was all connected. My professional triumph and my personal ruin were on a collision course. Fate hadn't just handed me a weapon. It had built me a stage. This boardroom, this multi-billion-dollar corporation, was the stage. I was no longer just an ex-girlfriend with a folder of damning evidence. I was a key consultant for the very company that held Ethan's entire future in its hands. The power dynamic had shifted so violently it was almost comical. That evening, with 10 days left on my eviction notice, my phone rang. It was Ethan. I let it ring 3 times, composing myself, then answered, my voice deliberately calm and neutral. "Hello? Clara," he said, his tone oozing a smug, feigned concern. "Just checking in. I hear you're doing great things over at Sterling, really knocking it out of the park. Even had lunch with the big man himself, I hear." Of course he knew. He was probably tracking my every success, enjoying the irony. "I'm a professional, Ethan," I replied coolly. Right. Of course. "Listen, about that," he said, getting to the point. "Since you're so in with the top brass there, you know they're looking to acquire AITA. It would really help things move smoothly if you could, put in a good word for me. Mention my vision, my leadership. Nothing major." I almost laughed out loud. The audacity was breathtaking. He stood on the verge of the biggest payday of his life, a payday built on fraud, and he was asking me, the woman he had publicly humiliated and discarded, to help him seal the deal. "And what's in it for me?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. He chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "I'm not a monster, Clara. You help me, and I'll talk to Olivia. We can be generous. Give you another week, maybe 2, to get your stuff out of the house." He thought he was offering me crumbs from his table. He had no idea I was about to burn his entire kingdom to the ground. I took a slow, deliberate breath, a cold, sharp smile playing on my lips that he couldn't see. "Of course, Ethan," I said, my voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "I'd be happy to talk to them about you." I paused for effect, letting him savor his perceived victory. "I'll make sure they get the most comprehensive view of you and your company." After I hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the lights of the city. The 30-day clock was still ticking, but it no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like a countdown. I picked up my phone again and sent a short encrypted email to Mr. Davies. The morning of the final acquisition meeting arrived with the heavy, charged stillness that precedes a storm. I stood before my full-length mirror, not in a power suit or anything designed to intimidate, but in a simple, elegant sheath dress in a deep sapphire blue, a color Ethan had always said was too bold for me. It was my armor, my statement. I was not the woman he had left shattered on the floor. I was someone new, someone he had unwittingly created. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. "Burn them to the ground." I smiled and texted back, "I won't need a single match." I walked into the Sterling Court boardroom on the 40th floor, the city of Austin sprawling beneath us like a map of my own private battlefield. The air was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and anticipation. I took my seat, not at the back of the room as a junior consultant, but at the main table, to the right of Mr. Harrison, a position of honor and trust. My laptop was open, the presentation for the office integration plan on the screen, a perfect alibi for my presence. My real purpose, however, was to act as the silent executioner. Mr. Davies had delivered the dossier to Mr. Harrison's office the previous evening. The trap was set. All I had to do was watch it spring. Ethan and Olivia arrived 5 minutes later. Ethan was the picture of confidence, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. He strode in with the swagger of a man who believed he was about to conquer the world, a triumphant grin already on his face. He stopped dead when he saw me. For a fleeting second, his mask of self-assurance slipped, revealing a flicker of confusion and deep-seated unease. He couldn't comprehend why I, the decorator, was at this table. Olivia, ever the professional, recovered more quickly. She simply narrowed her eyes, her mind clearly racing to calculate this new, unexpected variable in her equation for success. She gave me a tight, professional nod before taking her seat. As E, Tech's legal counsel, a portrait of sleek, predatory ambition. Mr. Harrison, a master of corporate theater, began the meeting. His voice, a low baritone that commanded attention, filled the room. "Good morning. Before we hear from Mr. Cole about the exciting future of E-Tech, I want to extend my gratitude to Clara Vance." He gestured toward me, and all eyes, including Ethan's and Olivia's, swiveled in my direction. Her insight and uncompromising commitment to integrity have been invaluable to Sterling Corp as we move into this new chapter. She has a rare talent for seeing what lies beneath the surface, for understanding the true foundation of a structure. He let that last phrase hang in the air, his gaze sweeping over Ethan and Olivia before settling back on his papers. It was the signal. Ethan launched into his presentation. He was good. I had to give him that. He was a charismatic salesman, painting a dazzling picture of E, Tech's future with buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and next-generation architecture. He clicked through slides filled with soaring graphs and inflated projections, weaving a narrative of unstoppable growth. He was selling a fantasy, and for a moment I could see how so many people, including myself, had bought into it. He finished with a flourish, a confident smile plastered on his face, clearly expecting a round of applause. Instead, he was met with a clinical, unnerving silence. Mr. Harrison simply nodded to his CFO, a hawk-eyed man named Peterson. "Mr. Cole, Peterson began, his tone deceptively mild as he adjusted his glasses. Impressive projections. Our due diligence team just had a few fiscal anomalies they'd like to clarify before we proceed. For instance, a series of significant payments made to a vendor called Apex Innovative Solutions. We can't seem to find any record of this company providing any actual services or deliverables. Ethan's smile tightened, but he kept his composure. Apex is a freelance consulting firm, he said smoothly. We use them for agile development projects on a contract basis. It's standard startup practice to maintain flexibility. Is it also standard practice, Peterson countered, not missing a beat, his voice turning a shade cooler, for the sole director of this consulting firm to share a mailing address with your personal accountant? Our team found that rather cozy. A bead of sweat trickled down Ethan's temple. He licked his lips. That's a coincidence. It's a large office building. I see, Peterson said, peering over his glasses. And is it also a coincidence that this firm's corporate account was used to wire a precise sum of $250,000 to the escrow company that handled the down payment on your new house on Sycamore Hill just 3 days after E-Tech closed its Series B funding round? The blood drained from Ethan's face. He shot a panicked look at Olivia, whose own expression had turned to stone. She knew in that instant that this wasn't a routine inquiry. This was a targeted, well-researched strike. I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan stammered, his bravado crumbling into dust. My personal finances are separate. Peterson ignored him and shifted his gaze, his focus landing squarely on Olivia. Speaking of personal matters that seem to intersect with corporate funds, he said, his voice like chipping ice, we also noted several charges on the company credit card for luxury travel. A week-long stay at a 5-star resort in Bali, for example, booked for 2. The charge corresponds exactly to the dates Miss Olivia Hayes here. He nodded curtly at her, posted a series of vacation photos from that very resort on her public social media. The geotags were quite specific. Olivia went rigid, her face a mask of pale shock. She had been caught, her alibi incinerated by her own vanity. She had been so careful with the legal documents, so meticulous in her betrayal, but had been undone by an Instagram post. This is an outrage, Ethan blustered, attempting to regain control, his voice rising in desperation. My personal life has no bearing on my company's performance. You have no proof of any wrongdoing. This is slander. On the contrary, Mr. Harrison said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that cut through Ethan's rant. He gave a subtle nod to his assistant, who moved silently to the head of the table. The assistant placed a thick, spiral-bound dossier in front of Ethan and Olivia. It landed on the polished mahogany with a soft, final thud that echoed like a gavel. It was my contribution. My late nights, my focused rage, all distilled into a single, undeniable document. I watched as Ethan's trembling hand opened the cover. The first page was a high-resolution copy of the wire transfer from the shell company to the escrow account, the numbers stark and unforgiving. The next was a printout of the hotel bill from Bali, itemized and paid for by the E-Tech corporate card. Page after page laid out his entire fraudulent enterprise in stark, black-and-white detail, forged invoices, phantom vendors, damning email chains I had recovered with Maya's help. It was his whole corrupt life, autopsied and indexed for all to see. At Sterling Corp, we consider integrity to be our most valuable asset, Mr. Harrison declared, his voice ringing with the cold authority of a judge delivering a verdict. This acquisition is terminated, effective immediately. Furthermore, a full copy of this dossier, along with our internal audit findings, is being delivered to the district attorney's office as we speak. I believe the term they'll be interested in is wire fraud and embezzlement. The room was silent, save for the sound of Ethan's ragged breathing. Olivia, the cunning lawyer, saw her own future imploding. Her career, her reputation, her license all were about to be consumed in the inferno Ethan had created. Her survival instinct, honed by years in a cutthroat profession, kicked in with breathtaking speed. She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. I had no knowledge of these financial irregularities, she announced, her voice shaking but firm, addressing the Sterling board as if Ethan were no longer in the room. Her eyes were wide with practiced disbelief. I was retained as external counsel, and was provided with what I was led to believe were accurate financial records. In light of this information, my firm will of course cooperate fully with any investigation into Mr. Cole's activities, and I am resigning as his legal counsel effective immediately. She gathered her sleek leather portfolio, and without a single glance at the man she had conspired with, the man for whom she had just destroyed another woman's life, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, abandoning him to his fate. Ethan sat alone, utterly broken. The smug architect of my ruin was now just a common thief, exposed and disgraced in the very arena he had so desperately wanted to conquer. His empire had vanished. His allies were gone. His future was a smoking crater. He slowly lifted his head and looked at me, his eyes pleading, searching for some explanation, some flicker of the woman he once knew. He was trying to understand how this had happened, how I, the quiet decorator, could have orchestrated such a complete and devastating takedown. I gave him nothing. My face was a blank slate. No triumph, no pity, no anger. Just the quiet, empty finality of a debt that had been paid in full. I gathered my own belongings, gave a respectful nod to Mr. Harrison, and walked out of the room, leaving the man who had tried to destroy me to be swept away with the rest of the trash. I never looked back. 3 months later, a letter arrived from my new lawyer, Mr. Davies. As he had predicted, the sale of the house had been nullified by the court. Because it was purchased with funds proven to be stolen, Ethan's claim to ownership was void, and Olivia's subsequent purchase was fraudulent. The house on Sycamore Hill was mine, entirely and unequivocally mine. That evening, I stood in the living room, the same room where my world had been torn apart. I had repainted the main wall a deep, calming sapphire blue. The setting sun cast long golden rays across the oak floors. The air smelled of turpentine and fresh canvas, as I was sketching out new designs for a new clienta referral from a very satisfied Mr. Harrison. The house was quiet. It was peaceful. It was mine. Maya came over carrying a bottle of champagne. To the queen of the castle, she said, handing me a glass. We toasted, the sound a happy, clear chime in the evening air. "Do you ever feel bad?" she asked quietly, her eyes searching mine. "About what happened to him." I thought for a moment, swirling the bubbles in my glass. I thought of the humiliation, the heartbreak, the cold calculation in his eyes. I thought of the woman I had become in the crucible of his betrayal. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I don't feel bad for him. I feel grateful. He took everything from me, and in doing so, he forced me to build something better, something stronger. That was all my own." The house was no longer a symbol of betrayal, but a monument to my own resilience. I had taken the ugliest, most painful moment of my life and used it to build a better one, from the ashes on my own terms.